Well, welcome, Ciara, to the Moms of Tweens and Teens podcast. I'm so excited to have you on the show.
I'm so excited to be here. Thank you, Cheryl.
Gosh, you reached out to me. I don't even know how you found me, but I looked up your website. I looked you up on Instagram. I read your writing and your story, and I was like, I have to have you on the show. The moms, caregivers that are listening, they have to hear, what you have to share with parents and your message. And I want to start out, but I had told you in the notes, like, I just want to start slow and like bit by bit have you share your story because it's so powerful and we have so much to learn from your story. So let's just start there. So tell just a little bit about yourself. Mm-hmm. And why don't you start with what you're doing now and what led you to what you're doing?
Yeah, so thank you so much for that lovely intro. So I would say that I had a dark night of the soul as a teenager. Like many people in life go through some period of feeling lost and alone and confused. And I went through that at a pretty young age. And my parents obviously wanted to help me with my pain and my distress. And they sought out lots of different treatment interventions for me, ranging from talk therapy and medication to an inpatient hospital program. I spent time in wilderness therapy and in a therapeutic boarding school. So I spent a lot of my adolescence as a troubled teen in different treatment environments and going through lots of different experiences, ranging from healing to confusing to traumatizing to memorable to funny. And as an adult, I sort of started by just writing and sharing about some of my perspective online because I had felt very misunderstood as a teenager. And I felt that there was not a lot of adults or people sort of in the culture that I felt had resonant experiences with what I had been through. And especially on some topics that are not often talked about, like self-harm, for example. And so I started sharing more and more online, and then that naturally became a platform for me to offer a teenager's point of view for parents. And so what I do now is supporting teens and parents, like families, through these challenges and through these transitions.
Wow. So let's start. I mean, it was like 8 when you went to your first therapist, right?
Yes.
And so what were you struggling with? Like, take us back to that time. How were you feeling?
So when I was younger, I felt really lonely. I felt really lonely. When I was young, and for most people, like, your world's really small when you're young.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have all these opportunities to go to like a book club or like a coffee shop and talk to people. Like, it's very limited who you're interacting with. And I felt really, really lonely. And a core need for a child or any human being is to connect and to feel witnessed. And I obviously didn't have language for that at the time. I just felt like it's me and the world. And I felt really, really overwhelmed by sadness. Like, I was a very sad kid. I really struggled to make friends. I was anxious a lot of the time. I was intelligent, which in some ways was almost more isolating because I found it very difficult to connect with people. And I would talk about wanting to die or feeling like I didn't belong in my house. And so my mom found me a therapist when I was 8. And then I went to her for a little bit, and then my parents got divorced when I was 9. So then I went to a different therapist to kind of have some help processing that. So my experiences in therapy did start pretty young, but they were a little bit touch and go, like maybe for a few months at a time.
Yeah, I mean, wow, I'm thinking of like an 8-year-old and how you must have felt, and then your mom hearing you say those things and how scary that must have been for her,
Yeah.
and that you were feeling sad. Do you have any siblings?
I have an older brother and a younger stepbrother. So at
Okay.
that point, it was me and my older brother. Yeah.
Okay. How much older is he than you?
He's 2 years older.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So the only female, the only girl,
Yeah.
where it sounds like you were very much a very sensitive
Yes.
kid.
Yes.
And my oldest is like that. Like she would feel things deeply.
Yes.
Where
Yes.
my other two, I could see that they kind of could let it roll off their shoulders, but she deeply felt things. If she got hurt, she was really hurt.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. And that's like a gift and a curse, I feel like, because
Absolutely.
now you're using it as a gift to be able to help others out of your story. But at
Mhm.
that time, it was really painful and lonely.
Yeah. Yeah. And like when you're so young and you don't have language for it or even awareness of what's going on in your system, like I'm sure for your daughter too, is just this like overwhelm of emotion and then not knowing how to process that. So you're kind of carrying it around for a really long time.
Yeah. And so then, so your parents got divorced. Was that really hard on you?
Yes, that was very hard.
Yeah. And then what happened? So then you're 9, 10, going into middle school, which, oh my gosh.
God.
Who wants to go back to middle school?
Not for $1 million. Like literally no one could pay me to go back to middle school.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I've listened to some of your other podcasts where experts have spoken about middle school because it is such a confusing and painful and lonely time. Um, and it was for me too. Middle school was actually in some ways, socially harder than high school. I felt like in high school, people were a little bit more mature, but in middle school, it was like one day you'd be friends with people, and then the next day they'd be like, we've decided we don't like you anymore, and we're not talking to you. And there's so much drama and gossip. And again, at that age, you don't have the perspective of being adult and being like, okay, this isn't going to matter in 5 years. It's your whole world. So
Yeah.
one day all your friends stop talking to you, like that just is devastating. And um, in middle and in high school, I felt like um, I was so starving for just authentic connection. And this is not to suggest that I was going around being totally real and honest and forthcoming and vulnerable, and people were just snubbing me. It was like I was acting how everyone was acting, which was like, it's all about posturing and performance and how athletic are you and how popular are you and how beautiful are you and how much money does your family have. And it's the kind of like mechanisms of like socializing are so superficial and so surface level. So it just extended that feeling of like, I feel so alone and I don't feel like I can connect with anyone because I didn't know how to connect with anyone. It wasn't being modeled by like any of my peers. Like none of us were really doing that. So those feelings that I'd had from childhood, like I had kind of learned to cover them up. Like I learned how to make friends and I learned how to engage with people and interact with them. But in my core, I still felt really, really alone.
Oh, yeah. Gosh. Because at that age, you don't realize so many of the other kids are feeling the
Yeah.
same way.
Yeah.
And you were just, I mean, I bet that it would have felt so good if some girl would have said, oh my gosh, I am just like, I just feel like I hate myself. I'm not pretty enough. I'm not this, I'm not that. I just feel so broken inside. I feel so lonely. It would have been like, thank you,
Yes, exactly.
that
Yes,
I'm not alone. And I'm imagining you felt like something is wrong with me.
100%. Yeah, you nailed it exactly. It's like, it's not like I was saying that. I wasn't being, the brave one who was saying like, I actually feel like I'm drowning. Does anyone else feel that way? Like No one was saying it. And it would have felt so relieving if someone had been honest about that. So yeah, I could have known, okay, it's not just me.
Yeah, I don't want to compare it to how you were in depression and all of that, but I even think that, well, not I think, I know, even as moms, we can feel that way, or women, that we have to kind of fake it, because if I tell the truth about how I'm feeling, people are going to judge me, or I'm going to be rejected, or I'm going to be seen as weird.
Yes.
It's actually the opposite. I've had to learn that. And I remember the first time I got into a therapy group, like, people were talking real and I was terrified. I just sat there, I cried through the whole first time because people were opening up and I was so scared. I thought, if I tell people how I really feel, they're going to go, ooh, and it was the exact opposite.
Yeah.
And yeah, I just think that we're really afraid to be seen and known for our weaknesses and our pain and all of that. So yeah,
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 I so appreciate you saying that. It's so true. It's like we're all walking around looking for other people, like, to kind of validate us or reassure us, and afraid that they're going to see us. And they're all walking around like with the same experience too.
yeah,
Like,
yeah. And then we end up feeling, yeah, lonely. Like we're
yeah.
all wounded in different ways.
Yeah.
It sucks, but it's the human condition, right?
Yeah, I'm gonna say it, but it's everyone. It's like, like we all need oxygen. We all age. Like it's a feature of just being alive.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So then you're in middle school. That is, we all know, hell. And then you got into high school.
Yes. So I was, fine in middle school. Like I wasn't doing anything concerning, but high school was when all of this kind of just blew up. And it didn't happen overnight, as these things don't. Like it started with um these feelings just becoming ever more present in my mind. Like it felt like it was always just to the left of me, this feeling of like, I'm alone, no one understands me, I'm not good enough. And I started to like live from like you use the word wound. There's this way in which I was almost like living my life through that wound. Like I
Mhm.
felt so damaged and so different from everyone else that I would like act from that place. And I would, like criticize myself for not saying the right thing in like class, or for not being funny enough in a group setting. And I would just always be like running these tracks in my mind of like, that was so stupid, that was so wrong, like you're so ugly, you're so dumb, like you're not good enough, no one likes you. And I wasn't aware that like I was even having that. It was just as automatic again as like breathing. But having um that track in my mind all the time was obviously making me feel awful.
Yeah.
So I started self-harming, because I had actually self-harmed when I was younger, but I hadn't done it very frequently. But I didn't know what to do with all of that judgment that I felt for myself and all the pain that I felt inside. So it was like a
Yeah.
way of punishing myself, because I felt like I deserved to be punished. And it was also a way of like manifesting, or expressing just the pain that I felt. I didn't know what to do with it. And
Yeah.
that made sense to me at the time. I was like,
Mhm.
I have to do
Mhm.
something with this pain. I have to put it somewhere, and it made it feel more real. So it started with that. And then, I started doing really poorly in school because I was so down all the time and I had no energy. And also, all of these beliefs about myself were interfering with my focus, because I had very self-defeating thoughts like, why even try? Because I'm not going to do well. And I can save myself from disappointment if I just don't put any effort in. And
Mhm.
then, stuff with friends would be challenging. and I struggled with food. And it was just all of these different really dysfunctional patterns that I got stuck in that were kind of self feeding. Like I would do something and then feel bad for doing it. And then I would do the thing again to try and feel less bad, but then that would make me feel worse. So it was like this
The shame cycle.
exactly the shame cycle
Mm-hmm.
really difficult to break out of. And I ended up making a suicide attempt. And then that was kind of when things like got more serious. And then this whole sort of effort and journey into like the treatment program started like pretty soon after that.
So thank you for sharing all that. I mean, you said so many things. I mean, just the pain of being in your head, like ruminating. And I really like what you said. And I think it's just important to pause on it, how your thoughts, like you were thinking all these things about yourself, but it becomes this like this, you manifest it, right? It's like this co-creation that then you're feeling that, but then you think that nobody likes you, you don't belong. And so then you act in such a way that
Yes.
reinforces those beliefs.
Yes. Yeah.
And but you couldn't get out of that cycle. And so it just became, I mean, I just can imagine how you were feeling, so overwhelmed and just in your head that you just couldn't get out of it. And so it felt like the only way out was you just didn't want to have to be in that pain anymore.
Absolutely.
Did you, this is really a personal question, but do you feel like you really wanted to die? Or do you feel like it was a cry for help, or both?
I think that, okay, I'm probably answer this in like a few different ways.
Okay,
So
that's
I
good.
think that, so when I first thought about, um, making a suicide attempt, it was actually, there was a logic to it. And I remember at the time, I tried to imagine like, okay, let me think about all the best things that could happen in my life in the future. Like, let me imagine that like I get into like Harvard and like I, have like the perfect body and like, I think of like all these things. And obviously those reveal like very adolescent thinking. Like I'm thinking the things that are gonna make me happier, like going to an Ivy League and like being skinny. And I tried to imagine all of these things in the future. And I was like, okay, like let's say all these things happen. Did those equal out the pain that I'm in right now? And they didn't. Like in my mind, I was like, I couldn't think of anything in the future that would be like worth living for.
Wow.
It really didn't feel that way to me. And what I would say now, like to, my teenage self thinking that is like the references that I have for the future, like the kind of experiences that I'm trying to project into the future, like these hypothetical experiences or, imaginations, like they're coming from only like my current life. And at that point, I'd only experienced life in the way that we're talking about, where I do feel alone and where I don't really feel connected to anyone and I don't believe in myself. And so, of course, if like I'm imagining that life is always going to be this way, even the best version of this, like I don't want to be alive for that. But I would say, like to my teenage self or another teenager in this place, like you can't imagine like what's going to come your way because you haven't experienced it yet. Like your brain actually can't comprehend or fathom like how much better things are going to be and how much more there is in store for you and how much more there is worth hanging on to. Like you haven't had that experience yet to maybe have that feeling of knowing that it's coming, but like have the faith that there is something beyond your imagination, like beyond your ability to comprehend right now. And I don't think that I really wanted to die. Like it wasn't that I didn't want to be alive. It was like I didn't want to live the life that I was living. And I didn't at that point really understand that there was a whole other paradigm and a whole other experience to being alive. I just thought it was going to be a better version of this.
Yeah. Wow. Well, and you talk about the adolescent brain. I've read articles you've written. I've looked at your Instagram. Like that adolescent brain, you don't have that perspective taking. You're just in the here and now because the adolescent brain too. So you can't think logically in the future and reason that. It's just so momentary.
Yes.
Like,
Yeah.
I'm in this pain and I want to get out.
Yeah. Yeah.
How is your mom doing with all this? Like, when you went home at night, how was your relationship with her?
It was brutal. It was brutal for her. Sorry. Like it was, I mean, it was brutal for me too, but it was absolutely brutal for her because obviously she's my mom. And so when I'm in pain, she's in pain. And, most parents there's no trial run with this. Like, it's not like you get a, a chance to go through it with, a robot or something to try and see how you do it. Like she was just trying to help all the time. And we got into a lot of fights often, because she obviously had ideas of what she thought I needed to be doing to get better. And I didn't always agree with those. And
Yeah.
I always felt like, it's like I know it was coming, like now I know it was coming from a place of love, but at the
Mhm.
time I felt like you just think I'm broken. Like that was like how I often felt. I was like, you just look at me and you see a problem to be fixed. And I don't feel like you understand anything that I'm going through. And I didn't know that wasn't like a conscious thought at the time. It was just like an energetic experience that I was having in conversation with her. And now I know that it was coming from so much love for me. Like she would have done anything to help me. And it was destroying her the whole time because I was a very high risk child and she did not know how to keep me safe. And I was pushing back at her for trying to help me. So it's not as if this was her wanting to fix me from her own, ego or something, or like just a desire, like, oh, I just want this to be over. It was like she wanted to help me. But the way that I felt was, um, I am what's wrong here.
Mhm.
All the focus is on me being right. And I hated that.
Yeah.
And let her know that in not so nice ways.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So all the focus, you said, did I hear you right, is on me being right, on you being fixed?
Yeah.
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 Gosh, I like got teared up because it was reminding me of like with my oldest, where we talked a little bit and she's given me permission, talking, sharing our story together. But um I was so scared. And then she was so like anxious. It came out as defiance
Yeah. Yeah.
because it was like she was anxious and stressed and hurting. And then it made me want to fix it, well meaning, because I loved her so much and I wanted to help her out of the pain. But then what I would do is I try to control because I felt so powerless.
Yeah.
But we were like missing each other and butting heads and fighting. And the more that I would put pressure on her trying to fix her, the more that she would resist and fight against.
Yeah.
And I could see it's like, I forget, I listened to you in another interview. It's like, and the term that you use, but it's like designated patient. It was like, we end up making that kid's like the designated patient. Like, if I can just fix, you
Mhm.
know, fix this, well-meaning, and take you out of your pain. But I'm grateful. I started realizing like, oh my gosh, I need the support.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
need to get the support because this is too much for me to carry too.
Right. Yeah.
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 So your mom, and I'm assuming your dad was in this, but they were divorced. So that was probably just another layer of complicated.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Yeah. Yeah, I resonate so much with what you just said. Can I speak to a few things?
Yes, yes,
So
please.
you said something that I recognized in myself afterwards, which was my mom's efforts to help me. And this goes from my mom to also then when I was in treatment programs, and the authority figures were staff members or professionals in those settings, were their efforts to help me sort of set up this binary in my mind where I could either be cooperative and responsible, or I could be my own person. And so my mom, or the, whoever the authority figure at the moment was, would be like, you need to sleep and you need to not hurt yourself and you need to be honest. And I would be like, I'm not doing any of that because you said it. And a core need, because we've talked about like the adolescent brain, is to individuate. Like when you're a teenager, it's normal to want to be separate from your parents and your family because you're just trying to become your own person. And when you become an adult, you like go back, but there's like a very developmentally appropriate period of time in which this drive to be different and unique, like a unique being outside the family, is very strong. And so I just had, like this internal conflict because I was more concerned with that individuation and being my own person and wanting to put my feet down and be understood. But the way in which I was achieving that or expressing that was through self-destruction. So even though I thought I was like doing what was best for me, I was destroying myself. So I think that's an important thing for parents to be aware of, like how you can try and get on the same side of as your kid and not set up that kind of oppositional dynamic where you're trying to enforce rules and then they're resisting things that are actually really good for them and that they might want to do if it just wasn't coming from someone that they are resisting. And then the other thing that you said, that obviously this is not my phrase, but that you can't pour from an empty cup. Like parents, children, teens, like they feel their parents' energy so much. And when a parent is well-resourced and supported and is not needing anything from the child, like they're not like, I need you to be okay so that I can be okay.
Oh my gosh, yes. I use that phrase all the time.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Just you be okay. That's in therapy lingo, it's enmeshed. Like if you're okay, I'm okay, but you're not okay. So you better get okay so I can feel okay.
Exactly. Yeah. And as you said too, like it's important for parents to get their own support because it's not as if this is so when someone becomes a parent, they're not going to be affected by these kind of experiences. If your child is doing really dangerous things or really sad, of course that's going to affect you. But it's important, as you said, you get that support and you are well resourced so that you can come to those interactions in a different way.
Totally. Rather than just out of that fearful place where, and I knew that, like, I could see a real difference if I could go in and get support and like, like throw up, so to speak, in my support group, then I was able to come back and be so much more supportive because so much of it was my own stuff. But I just think I just want moms to know, like, the more that we try to control our teens, the more they're going to rip out. Like it's because of that individuation that you're talking about and that control. And then I will tell my moms, I'll think about if somebody tries to control you, like if somebody tells me, well, you have to, if my husband's like, well, you have to eat this at this time and you better go to bed at this time. I'm like, hell no. Like, I don't, how much more teenager? Like, it's just, so we're not going to have influence in a positive way. We're going to get a lot of resistance. And isn't that here you were seeking that in negative ways to get that power and that control?
Yeah.
And yet I'm so relating to your mom, it's like, we don't know what else to do. And when you have a kid that's self-harming, you feel despair and that, is so unhappy. And so, and I just love when you talk about it because you have such empathy and compassion for where she was at.
Yeah. Yeah. No, when I look back, I mean, I don't know how she did it, honestly.
Yeah. So then what happened?
Okay. So I had been doing at that point talk therapy for a while I was still in school and trying, lots of different meds and kind of going through a few of those. And that wasn't really making a huge difference in how I felt. And so I took medical leave from school for a while. I actually had mono at the time too, but I was just in a really bad place mentally as well. So I took medical leave from school for a time. And then I ended up going to an inpatient program at a psych hospital. And I was there for 7 weeks. I'm pretty sure it was 7 weeks. And that was a DBT program, which I don't know if you're familiar with
Yeah.
DBT therapy. It's a really popular type of therapy. And so I went and did this program at this residential hospital. And I know some people have positive experiences in residential programs. So I'm not trying to speak for that in entirety, but it was not a very impactful experience for me. I didn't really feel like in that setting that I got really down to the root of anything that was going on. I kind of learned some new coping skills, like, okay, if I'm having a panic attack, I can, dunk my head in ice water, or like, here's a way that if I'm feeling really overwhelmed, I can calm my nervous system down. But I didn't really get to any of the actual foundation of like why I was in so much pain. I just kind of found some better ways to cope with the day-to-day of it.
Yeah.
And medication honestly was also like a really big part of that experience. Like all of us were put on many, many more meds than we went in on. And I kind of felt like a zombie, honestly, the whole time that I was there. So
Wow.
I came home from that program and I was allowed to come home on a home contract, which is a practice with people who are like in treatments. Basically, like you can come home if you agree to all these things. And so I like agreed to all these things. I was like, okay, like I just wanted to go home. So I was like, yeah, I won't do any of this stuff. And then I went home, and because I was saying like nothing had really changed in me, I broke every rule on that, like just a few weeks later. And then after that, my mom was like, you're going on a camping trip. And I did not know what that meant at the time. I thought it was going to be something like, because, there's lots of different like outdoor education programs and things, and schools do outdoor ed and stuff. So I went to it was a wilderness therapy program that I got sent to, and I was there for 12 weeks. And that was the most positive of all of my experiences in treatment. It was not perfect. There were definitely things that were inhumane or dehumanizing about it.
Yeah.
But the experience of being in nature was so profound for me. Having space from all of because I was like with basically, to just give a little bit of kind of the logistics of how it worked. I was backpacking with a group of teen girls, and then there would be a few guides, and they would switch. Every week we'd get a different team of guides. So we would be with just a small group of people for a week at a time. And all of these kind of angst that I was talking about, of feeling like I feel so alone, I feel like no one understands me, because no one's being honest about it. When you're out in the middle of nowhere and you're with people all day, every day, and you're going through hailstorms and thunderstorms and extreme heat, and you're exhausted and you're sick and all this stuff is happening, like people get really honest.
Yeah. Yeah.
First,
Sleep deprived.
yeah, like
Yeah.
you're going to be real honest. And I loved what you said earlier, because I had actually had that exact moment that you were describing, where it was only like my 4th day, maybe it was really early in my stay. And this one girl in the group started having this breakdown, and she started saying, I feel like I'm always running from myself.
Oh.
So much pain. And exactly as you said, I started tearing up, because I was like, I have always felt that way. Thank you for being brave enough to say that.
Yeah.
And I'd never heard someone be so honest.
Wow.
Um,
It was like such a breath of fresh air. Like, oh my gosh, when somebody just tells the truth,
yeah.
thank
Yes.
God,
Thank you for just being
Yes.
you and saying what we're all experiencing at times.
Yes.
Yeah, it was major. And another thing that was really powerful about that was having those opportunities to contend with, the elements and difficult experiences. Like we had to learn how to make fire. with a bow drill set, which is a very primitive way of making fire. It's just with like sticks and a rock, and build shelter and, learn star constellations and things that were challenging, and physically challenging, like the hiking and just living outside for so long. And all of those experiences became proof to me that like I could do difficult things. Like I had been saying to therapists for years at that point, like, I feel so weak. I feel so incompetent. I feel like I can't do anything. And even though when I went there, I still felt that way. And I'm not gonna say those like went away entirely. I was able to feel in my body like a renewed sense of capacity and of like just like ability that I had, that I could do things that were really challenging.
Yeah,
Um,
like almost like would you use the word confidence?
that's exactly the word. Thank you. That was
Okay.
exactly the word. I was like,
Yeah, yeah.
confidence. Thank you. Thank you. Exactly. Yeah, a renewed sense of confidence. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And my parents came out to visit me there too. That was a really powerful experience. They both came separately. But that was a really powerful experience to have them come and to have the people who were facilitating that. Because again, I'd been to family therapy before. They both came to the hospital, but the kind of conversations that we had at that program was way more real. It was way more real. Yeah, so that was a really powerful experience. And again, I wrote an article about it. There were definitely parts of it that were not fantastic, but it was the most authentic experience of connecting with other people and connecting with the earth that I had ever had. And then after wilderness, everyone goes to aftercare, which I think is not always needed, but a lot of parents, I do think, are very afraid of their child relapsing in some way or reverting to the
Mhm.
pattern. So pretty much everyone goes to aftercare. And so after wilderness, I was still, needing a lot of credits for school. And so I went to a therapeutic boarding school. And that was a really difficult environment. It was very stern. They practiced attack therapy there, so there was a lot of like really harsh confrontation and just a really, really challenging place to be. So I was supposed to be there 2 years and I ran away basically after 9 months there.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just so struck by your story that I'm just sitting here like, wow, wow. Um, yeah, gosh. I mean, we could go off on a tangent about that because I've heard different stories of different perspectives on that schools afterwards
Yeah.
take, but you pretty much had said before we got on here that your mom was thinking that you didn't need to go. And yet that's what everybody was saying for you to go. And so to listen, that parents, we needed to listen to ourselves.
Yeah.
And you ended up going, you ran away, you came back. How did things get better? Like what happened that led you to healing, to having healing in your life?
I would say, obviously, I wish it could be as simple as like, I discovered yoga or this one therapy changed my life. Like, there was not like one thing that I just plugged in and it changed things. I read this great book about depression by Johann Hari, and he talked about how when people are in mental distress, it changes their perception of time. Like, they can't think of the future in the same way as someone who feels more mentally clear or healthy. And we've said as well, like that's a feature of the adolescent brain and the young adult brain. Because at that point I was, when I came home and I was like in kind of the years after this, I was like a young adult. But the experience that I had in wilderness was so revolutionary in that it was so different from normal life. Like living, like backpacking for 12 weeks with other teens was just completely bananas. And the adults that I met there lived very, very different lives and communicated in a very, very different way from anything I had ever experienced. Like they would, say things like, where do you feel that sadness like in your body? And I was like, what? Like no one's ever asked me that. or just sit with you, like while you were upset and like just be there with you. Like I'd never experienced that. And to just know that there were other lives and other ways to be an adult and other ways to be healthy and other ways that my life could look from what I had thought it needed to look before was enough for me to know that even though maybe I don't know what I'm going to do 5 years from now, or I don't necessarily know when I'm going to feel better or when this pain is going to stop or how it's going to stop, I know that a different experience is possible. Like, because I had that, I just knew that tomorrow things could feel different, or a week from now they could feel different. And so that helped me just keep trying and keep holding on. So I'd say like what I really used as my kind of compass and like how do I pursue something is like I looked for people who inspired me and who I felt really lit up by and whose lives I looked at and thought, you seem really present and embodied and connected to the world around you. Like, I want to learn from you. And so I just worked with so many different people, not like, back to back to back, but like over the years, I just kept seeking and searching and looking for different lessons or teachings or things that might give me more orientation. And I would say through all of that though, like there was for me and probably for many people in healing a point where it's like, okay, you're taking in so much from the world. Like, what about what's in here? And was a way in which like that kind of seeking almost became a little obsessive maybe, or like I was just taking in so much all the time because of that urge to be like, okay, what do I need to fix next? What do I need to improve next?
Yes. I'm never going to be enough. I just got to keep fixing myself.
100%. It's like the
Yeah.
shadow side of like personal development or like spiritual growth or like, any kind of self-improvement. Like, are you using this as a way to diminish who you are and like criticize who you are? So I do want to say that was a really important question for me to just look for like, what inspires me? What philosophy or languages or communities inspire me and make me feel lit up and let me go and be around those and learn from those. And also continuously coming back to myself and seeing where are these efforts or these reachings or these ways that I'm coping, trying to numb or like dull like something within myself. Like I'm trying to like fix myself in some way. And those were kind of, I'd say, like the two ways that I personally, walked on my path of healing. And then with my parents, like, honestly, I know this might be difficult to hear because I know your audience, they're teens and tweens, but age and time helped a lot.
Yeah.
Like just going through my own life experiences so that I could have more compassion for my parents and not just see them as these, icons and like, oh, you're like actually real people. Like I relate to you now and I understand you more than I did when I was younger. Like sometimes there's just no substitute for time and for just the wisdom that comes with age and experience and being able to like look more honestly at like my role in situations. And then also, see them as human beings who were once teens and children themselves.
Wow. So many good things in there that you said. I would love for you to share because so much woven through your story is this desire for truth, for somebody to be real, for somebody to be willing to listen. I mean, when you described what the wilderness therapist was doing, they were just sitting with you in your pain.
Mm-hmm.
And so you talk about basic needs and for the parents that are listening, what would you say that you really needed at that time that you would want parents to hear? Like if they have because there are definitely parents that are listening that are so in the trenches right now, going, have a kid that's acting out and struggling and self-harming. What words of encouragement do you have for them? What would you say to them?
It's sort of like a paradox because it's like you want to help, and you also want to be totally okay with everything being as it is, which is like, how do you do both of those things? But you need to do both. Like, I think it's important for parents, as we've said in this conversation, like, get the help that you need so that you can be a steady, loving, trustworthy presence for your child. Like, presence is probably the biggest thing that your child needs from you, is to just know that you're there when, and you're there and you're available to them, like a non-judgmental, unconditionally accepting and loving presence. And also, if your child is really in distress, that's not something that you need to bypass or ignore or pretend it doesn't exist. But I like, children really, really feel how you feel towards them. So if you're doing, if you're getting them a tutor, or you're getting them a therapist, or sending them to a program, whatever it is, and it's coming from this place of like, you're broken and like, you need to be fixed, or this is like such a problem that you're acting this way, they're going to feel that even if you never speak those words out loud.
Yep.
And I know it must be so challenging to do that as a parent when you have all of this evidence and all of this proof that there is something wrong. Like, if your child is harming themselves, I'm not going to say like, "Oh, nothing's wrong," like, just ignore that. But I think for parents, the most important thing to do is that they find how to hold this like faith and knowing that everything is going to be okay, both in just like the situation, like everything's going to be okay. Okay, the car just broke down, everyone's gonna be okay, we're gonna get a tow, it's all good. Like, find the ability to be that about the situation, but also in how you regard your child, like, to see in them, even when they're in pain or yelling at you, or like being really difficult, or locked away in their room, like, we've used this word, you're the creator of your life. I know that you're infinitely powerful and already whole in every way. And that is how I engage with you, from that place, from knowing you that way. And that's like Jedi level mastery, like, to be able to do that in the face of all this, that's not like
Yeah.
but that was like really what I needed, because I had so little belief in myself. And again, I don't think my parents like at the time knew that, but like, my mom in some ways almost like got into that story with me of like, everything is wrong, we need to help you, like, this is so bad. And I needed someone who could like sit with me in that, as we're saying, and like be with that pain, but also be like, I know you're more than your pain. And I know that you're going to get through this. Like, I will hold that belief until you can hold that belief too.
Yeah. It's so true. We're the mirror. Like, we hold it up and we reflect back, and our kids pick up on it. And I think that when your kid's in distress, like you were, then we get anxious.
Yeah, of
But then,
course.
we're anxious, and then our kids seeing it, and it's like, oh my gosh, I really am screwed up. Look at how my mom's like, I'm really messed up here.
Yeah.
Versus
Yeah.
like, we're both screwed up and we both need help. And, I need help and you're struggling, but I'm struggling too. And I'm learning too. Like, there's a book that's called The Parallel Process. Have you ever heard of that book? It's actually written for parents that kids are in wilderness.
Oh, wow.
It's so good, because that's the whole thing. And it's good for the listeners, like for any parent that's struggling, because that's the whole premise of the book. It's like, this is a parallel process, like, and if it's like, you're the one that's screwed up here, and it's my job to get you out of that, versus we're both struggling here. Don't you think that makes a big difference?
Such a difference. And then that reminds me of something else too, which I think then sometimes when this becomes, kind of a constant in the family, like when there is a child going through this, like, I think it's important that parents find ways to connect with and relate to their children outside of that. Like, I know it's tough if sometimes they're maybe not that open to it, but like, doing an activity together, or talking about a TV show, or like just having moments of connection that are not always talking about the mental health stuff.
Oh, totally.
Yeah. And then I think like the last thing I would say, just because we've talked about the individuation, Like, I think giving your teens just exposure to different opportunities to have meaningful connections, if that's like a summer camp they can go to, or like, maybe there's an after school program they can volunteer with, or maybe there's like an aunt that they really get on with who they can maybe go on a trip with sometime, to just have like other ways that they can connect, because of the individuation. Sorry. So
Yeah,
that
it's a
and
mouthful.
on the 11th, I like can't say it. Because they might not come to you and talk about like stuff with their friends or stuff with like a crush that they have at school, but they still need to be able to talk about that stuff. So just giving them places where they might connect with like a teacher or mentor or someone else could be really helpful.
Yeah, I love that. Well, Ciara, we're going to have you on again.
Yeah.
And yes, 'cause, there's just so much good stuff to talk about, and so much wisdom that you have. And I love that you're able to use your story. I think it's really powerful when we can make meaning out of our difficulties and our struggles and our trauma, and use it and for good. And that's what you're doing, and to help, because you do have so much insight and wisdom. And I think you were wired like that from the very beginning, when you were really young, and here you are, and you're so courageous. And I can see, like, you're going to just help so many people. You are, so many teens and so many parents. And I'm just super grateful for you coming on the show today. You have to tell them where to find you.
Okay. My website is hominginstinct.org, and I am also on Instagram. Just my name, Ciara Fanlo, Ciara Fanlo.
Yeah, just tell them really briefly why you called it homing instinct. I could cry just on that.
Oh, yes. So I love nature, as I've said, and metaphors. I love a metaphor, and animals like bears, squirrels, owls, salmon, in the same way that they have like a mating instinct or a survival instinct, they have a homing instinct. So after traveling great distances or through unfamiliar terrain, they have an inborn ability to find their way home. Like there's something in their body that just knows, like, this is where I need to go. This is how I need to move. This is where I need to be. And I loved that so much, because I felt like this whole healing journey for me and for so many people is about returning and remembering, and that we have the innate wisdom and ability to do that. And I love that was just something that's like in nature, that's like in us too.
And wanting to come home to yourself.
Yeah. Yeah. And also for the word home, because obviously like the family is so important in all of this. And so it's about you, but it's also about your place and your connection to a family, to a world that's more than just you too.
Yeah, which gives our listeners so much hope. Yeah. So thank you. Thanks again for coming on.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate you sharing so much too.